Manny Ramirez was perhaps the most lazy player in MLB history. While playing left field, oftentimes he'd forget how many outs there were, so a Red Sox team psychologist made him a laminated sheet, which reminded him to keep track of outs and where to throw the ball. But this didn't stop him from producing a few painstaking errors during crucial playoff games, and when the Sox were facing elimination in 2004, he said, quote, "Who cares? There's always next year." His laziness even reached the White House when President Bush joked about his grandma dying because he didn't show up with his team after winning the World Series. And speaking of not showing up, during his career there was widespread speculation that he would fake injuries because he didn't want to play. But at the plate, there were not many hitters on his level, finishing his career top 20 all time in terms of home runs, RBIs, and OPS. Then, once it came time for playoffs, he became arguably the greatest postseason performer of all time, with numerous clutch hits, and helped the Red Sox break the curse of the Bambino after 86 grueling years. He was without question one of the most prolific bats in MLB history, but he also dominated throughout his entire life. During his senior season, Manny was all the buzz around the nation. At the plate, he had a ridiculous .650 batting average, hit 14 home runs, and posted 40 RBIs, leading the Cleveland Indians to select him 23rd overall in the 1991 draft. But instead of the praise most would receive from their loved ones, after accomplishing such an impressive feat, his family had no idea. In fact, they didn't know Manny was an elite baseball player because he told them not to go to his games. It wasn't until a family friend called his sister to tell her that he was drafted and that they were talking about him on local television. Manny never invited his family to games because he was very shy and reserved growing up. His coach Steve Mandel even stated, "He's introverted off the field and a terror on it." This continued to be the case when he was in the Indians minor league system, as he told his coach his lack of desire to continue playing and that he wanted to quit. Yet every time he stepped foot on the field, he tore the seams off baseballs and quickly became one of the top prospects in the game, eventually getting the call to the major leagues in September of 1993, and in just his second game he displayed his nonchalant personality to the extreme when he managed his first hit of his career, a long fly ball down the left field line, which bounced over the wall for a ground rule double. But Manny, not knowing it bounced first, thought it was a home run and was rounding the bases before his teammate Carlos Baerga finally got his attention and told him to go back to second. Everyone in the stadium started laughing at Manny, but he would get the last laugh as he managed to not only hit his first major league home run later that game, but also his second. It was an incredible showing from the 21-year-old, but over the course of his 22 games at the majors that season, he struggled, managing just those 2 home runs and hit for an underwhelming 170 average. It wasn't until the 1994 season before he truly started to demonstrate his elite potential. He hit 17 home runs, managed a .269 average, and finished second in Rookie of the Year voting. But despite his excellence in the batter's box, it was another story out of it. He once asked a sports writer for a $60,000 loan so he and Julian Tavares could buy a couple of motorcycles. And in the Dominican Winter League, he continued to demonstrate his lazy play on the base paths, so veteran Tony Pena said, "Next time you don't run, I'll kick you in the butt, and don't think I won't either." But despite the threat, Manny continued to play lackadaisically on the field. After stealing second base, he couldn't pick up the ball and assumed it was fouled off, so he went back to first base. However, it was just in the pitcher's glove and he was thrown out trying to get back to second, much to the dismay of his manager. Moments like these started to make everyone involved with the Indians angry, but he would continue to silence them with his elite bat. On June 19th, 1995, he hit his first career walk-off home run against pitcher Ken Ryan, which was a towering shot to deep right field. He would continue performing like this throughout the rest of the season, and in the playoffs hit not 1 but 2 homers in the ALCS, and then recorded his first World Series homer against the Atlanta Braves, although it wouldn't amount to much as they ended up losing in 6 games. But by this point, he had solidified his role as one of the newest young stars of the Indians franchise, and was rewarded with a 4-year $10.15 million extension. Now you'd think with the added responsibility of bearing a lucrative contract, he'd act a bit more more professional, but instead, Manny just kept being Manny. Instead of depositing his checks, he rarely cared. He once left one in a pair of cowboy boots in the visitors' clubhouse in Texas. Then, when he was confronted by the team's PR director about cashing in his checks, Manny rummaged through his cleats and batting gloves at the bottom of his locker and found 3 unopened, crumpled up envelopes, each containing a check worth 2 weeks of salary. Yet when it came time for hitting, he made sure to be diligent in his training. Oftentimes at spring training, he would show up an hour before everyone else to occupy the batting cages, and it showed in his game. From 1998 to 2000, he posted the 5th most home runs in baseball, averaging 42 each year, had the 2nd highest OPS at 1,072, and the 2nd most runs driven in with 432, 165 of which coming during the 1999 season. He played only 147 games. That figure was the most since the 1930s and hasn't been topped since. His offensive prowess was part of the best offense in baseball, as the Indians ranked atop the leaderboard in terms of runs per game from 95 to 2000, and brought them to the playoffs in all but one of these seasons. Yet he struggled to be consistent, because while he did have monster postseasons in 96 and 98, posting a combined 6 home runs in 14 games and an average over 300, the other 3 years he struggled at the plate, hitting below 200 over 24 games. And during these playoff series, he was lazy whenever he wasn't at the plate. In Game 6 of the 1998 ALCS against the New York Yankees, the Indians were facing elimination. It was do or die time for the club, and all hands were on deck. When they went down early 6-0, they fought back with 5 runs in the top of the 5th, 4 of which coming off Jim Thome's grand slam. They were back in the game and had a few more innings to save their season, but the Yankees were able to extend their lead off a peculiar fly ball.
In the gap, Ramirez back at the wall. It's off the top. 1 run scores. Junior's on his way to 3rd. Throw to the plate, not in time. A 2 RBI triple from Derek Jeter.
Upon first glance, it's hard to tell what exactly happened, but on replay, it becomes crystal clear.
Carries and carries and carries, and Manny Ramirez can't, well, he ran by the ball. If he'd stuck his glove out, he might have caught it. Look at this, he runs to the wall and leaps, thinking it's a home run, and it lands below him.
With the Indians trailing by just 1 run in a winner-go-home game, Manny thought the ball was sailing over the wall for a home run. But in reality, it landed on the warning track. For most other right fielders, they would have picked up on this and caught the ball, holding the runners at 1st and 2nd. But instead, the Yankees were able to cushion their lead, and then once more later in the inning, via an RBI single by Bernie Williams to bring their advantage to 4 runs. All they would need to eliminate the Indians. This wasn't the only time he switched off during the playoffs, with another instance coming in Game 2 of the 1995 World Series. After already losing the first game, winning the 2nd was crucial to get them back in the series, or risk it getting too far out of hand by falling behind 2-0. Unfortunately for the Indians, it was looking to be this way, as the Braves held a 4-3 advantage in the 8th. Manny, however, was able to start something in the inning with a broken bat single into center field. With power bat Jim Thome behind him, things were looking up for the Indians, but once again, Manny was too careless.
A throw in to first base, and they got him!
You can see the frustration on his manager Mike Hargrove's face when he was picked off, because he knew this would be one of the last opportunities to win the game. Sure enough, the Braves were able to hang on to their narrow lead and eventually take the series in 6 games. As for Manny, he just wrote both events off. After the missed fly ball, he walked back to the dugout, shrugged his shoulders, grinned, and said, "That ball almost hit me in my back." Then, after the pickoff at first base, he got back to the dugout and said, "I thought I was Ricky Henderson for a minute." Moments like these encapsulated the early parts of his career. With the bat, he was as good if not better than every right-handed hitter in baseball, but whenever it came to other parts of the game, such as base running or in the field, oftentimes he was too lazy to give it his all. However, this didn't stop him from becoming one of the most prized free agents after the 2000 season. In fact, he was poised to become one of the richest players in sports history. He just had to choose where he wanted to go. Of course, the Indians wanted to retain him. They tried and tried again by offering a 7-year, $56 million contract in 1999, and then in free agency they offered 7 years, $119. But that wasn't enough. Manny was looking for a deal worth $200 over 10 years. A steep price, but a few teams were willing to bid for his services. The Yankees, as they typically do, came in offering a lump sum, and so too did the Mariners, who were anticipating the departure of star shortstop Alex Rodriguez. But in the end, the Boston Red Sox were the team he was most intrigued by for a few different reasons. For starters, he liked how there was a significant Latino population in the city, and he saw how gracefully fellow Dominican Pedro Martinez was welcomed by fans. It also helped that the club was offering the most money, as the Indians didn't push far past their original offer, while the Sox on the other hand gave him what he wanted, an 8-year deal worth $160 million, with 2 club options which would escalate the deal to 10 years, $200. This was a huge moment in sports history, as he became the second richest man in sports, only trailing Alex Rodriguez, who signed his infamous $252 million deal just before his. Because of his departure, Indians fans couldn't help but be upset. Manny, on the other hand, had 160 million reasons to be happy, and Sox fans, who were longing for a star offensive weapon, were finally starting to believe they were gearing up for a contention window. For this reason, they couldn't help but cheer emphatically when he sent the first pitch he saw at Fenway over the Green Monster.
Swings, and it's one high and deep to left, and that ball is out of here. On the first pitch, Manny Ramirez hits one out.
This homer sparked a monster month of April for Manny, hitting .408 with 9 homers and 31 driven in, all within 25 games. But his power output wouldn't stop there. On June 23rd, he hit one of the longest home runs in Fenway Park history at a recorded 501 feet. This homer jumped off his bat and soared a mile high off the light pole in left field. To Manny, this was light work. A few weeks earlier, he hit a ball 491 feet in Toronto, which landed on the 5th deck, which is still to this day the longest home run ever hit in the stadium. By this point, Red Sox fans were falling in love with their newest star, but over the next few years, his personality and laziness started to get under people's skin. On May 11, 2002, he broke one of his fingers during a contest against the Mariners, and after experiencing a few minor league games with their AAA affiliate, asked if he could stay there instead of rejoining the Major League squad. A few months later, on September 9th, he did not leave the batter's box after grounding back to the pitcher. Instead, he made little more than a lurch toward first base before he pivoted and headed back to the dugout with his bat in hand. A year later, on September 2nd, he said he was too weak from his recent case of acute throat inflammation to play, yet was seen socializing with a member of the Yankees and did not report to a doctor's appointment at Fenway Park the next morning, prompting teammates and bosses to privately harbor or publicly express varying degrees of concern about his commitment to the team. That season, the Red Sox also went under new ownership, and new senior advisor Bill James conducted a few studies to find how many times the Red Sox players made a game-altering failure to hustle. During the 2003 season, he found 53 of these occurrences. 29 of them were from Manny. He even mentioned that Manny was at the far end of the as bad as you can get in the field spectrum, so they wanted out of the whole Manny ordeal and placed him on irrevocable waivers, which meant any team in baseball, the reigning World Series champions, the Miami Marlins, their division rivals, the New York Yankees, or even the 43-win Detroit Tigers, could have him. All they needed to do was pay his remaining salary. Still, Manny went unclaimed. But unsatisfied with him on the roster, the Sox continued to push him away. They did have a plan in place to send him to the Texas Rangers in exchange for Alex Rodriguez. But the Players Association nixed the deal due to A-Rod reworking his contract for less money. The Red Sox were stuck with him, and as you would expect, after a couple of attempts to get rid of him, Manny was not happy to still be in Boston. But in the end, it was a good thing the two sides stuck together for a few more years. After all, they were a much better team with him in the lineup. After coming within one game of making it to the World Series in 2003, the Sox were primed for another deep run. Their offense, led by Manny, designated hitter David Ortiz, center fielder Johnny Damon, and catcher Jason Varitek, tormented opposing pitchers all season long, and their 1-2 in the rotation, Pedro Martinez and Curt Schilling, were two of the most elite starters in the game. This group dominated all season with multiple long winning streaks, including a 10-gamer starting in in late August. As for Manny, he was the catalyst for their success, sending 43 balls over the fence and finishing third in MVP voting. But the biggest talking point of his season came on July 21st.
The ball bounces away. Now here comes the first throw that Manny cuts off. And then Manny throws the bell horn. That's one of the strangest relays I think you'll ever see.
For some reason, Manny decided to cut off Damon's throw, and because of this, the batter David Newhand was able to hit an inside-the-park home run. Yeah, this was definitely one of those moments Bill James was talking about when he said Manny had a tendency to be switched off in the field. But regardless, the Sox were able to finish the season with 98 wins, their most in almost 30 years, and set them up to face the new-look Angels squad in the first round of the playoffs. Because despite winning the World Series just 2 years prior, they had completely new faces leading them, such as the 2004 MVP Vladimir Guerrero and starters Kelvin Escobar and Bartolo Colon. Together, they were looking to become the first team of the 21st century to win multiple World Series titles, so most presumed it was going to be a hard-fought battle. But in the end, the Angels put up a little fight, as the Sox were able to sweep them rather comfortably, in large part to Manny's efforts, managing 5 hits in the 3 games and driving in 7 runs, lifting the Sox to their second straight ALCS appearance, where once again they were squaring off against the Yankees, a team Manny hated. As a matter of fact, part of the reason why he chose the Sox was because he wanted to beat them. After failing to do so the year prior, he now got the opportunity to achieve this goal. But he would need a lot of help from his teammates, because while he did manage 9 hits and 5 walks in the 7-game series, he didn't drive in a single run, and his defense wasn't anything to rave about either, making a silly mistake in Game 5. With the score tied at 4 apiece in the 12th, he allowed Miguel Cairo to stretch a single into 2 bases, but Sox pitcher Tim Wakefield was able to cover for his mistake and not allow Cairo to score, allowing the Sox to stay in the game and become the first team in MLB history to overcome a 3-0 deficit in the playoffs. This was it. The Red Sox were heading to the World Series for the first time since 1986, and to pay homage to that team, Manny tried his best Bill Buckner impression with 2 lazy back-to-back mistakes in Game 1.
Marquis will come to the plate after initially stopping to throw home, safe, and it's a 1-run game. Larry Walker into shallow left field. Ramirez coming on. Can't make the play. Cedeno will go to third and come around and score. Over to third is Renteria. And it's second and third, only 1 out, as Manny Ramirez has made back-to-back mistakes in left.
Manny's lapse in judgment in the field during these back-to-back plays almost cost the Sox the game, as the Cardinals were able to tie it up at 9 apiece. But all jokes aside, Manny was by far the Sox's most influential bat during the series, recording at least 1 hit in all 4 games and drove in 4 runs, leading the Sox to their first World Series title since 1918.
Back to full. Red Sox fans have longed to hear it. The Boston Red Sox are world champions.
During the postseason, Manny had his hiccups. His error almost cost the Sox in the championship round, and then his 2 back-to-back in Game 1 of the World Series almost gave the Cardinals the series lead. But at the plate, he was a force the entire playoffs. In the 14 games, he recorded at least 1 hit in each of them, and was the Sox's best hitter in the World Series. So rightfully, he was awarded MVP of the Fall Classic.
First, it was a lot of negative stuff. I was going to get traded, but, I keep my confidence on myself, and I believe in me, and I did it. I'm just blessed, and I proved a lot of people wrong. I know I could do this, and thanks God I did it.
He was right. The new ownership group in Boston wasn't too pleased with how Manny played the game, and he was almost shipped out on 2 different occasions. But now he was awarded World Series MVP for a team that spent almost a century trying to get back on top. For Manny, he had 2 goals when he entered the league. First off, winning the World Series, check. Second of all, make the Hall of Fame, which by this point seemed like a given. He was consistently ranking towards the top in each major offensive category and adding postseason heroics to his resume only sweetened the pot. However, due to a few questionable actions towards the end of his career, he may never realize this dream. But before all of that, he was entering the 2005 season, rejuvenated after winning a title, and continued to mash with the bat, hitting his 400th career home run on May 15th, just one of 45 he had that season. Yet fans were more interested in watching him play left field, because while yes, he did once again finish with the most errors in his position, he would disappear into the green monster during games. He did this on numerous occasions, sometimes to go to the bathroom, other times as a joke, and on August 2nd, he went into the green monster and came back holding a sign reading the new episode, Manny being Manny. This was the first time he had acknowledged this phrase, and moments like this made him only more beloved by fans. But behind the curtain, he was unhappy being in Boston, and trade rumors followed him all season long. That offseason, he even threatened to show up to spring training late if he wasn't traded. But once again, the Sox couldn't find any suitors, and Manny made his frustrations known by showing up a few days late. But just like the first time he and the Sox were trying to part ways, the two sides stayed together and Manny lifted them to a World Series title. In the 2007 divisional round, he had a walk-off 2-run homer in Game 2 against the Angels. In the championship round against his former team, he cemented himself as the most powerful hitter in playoff history when he broke the all-time record for homers with his 23rd career shot. In the end, he hit .348 and held an over 1100 OPS in 14 games during the playoffs, helping the Sox win their second title in 4 years by sweeping the Colorado Rockies. An impressive feat, becoming the first team of the century to be multiple-time winners. At the championship parade, Manny, emphatic as he could be after climbing atop baseball's most impressive summit, stated how he hoped to play 6 more years with the Red Sox and retire as an all-time club great. But this is where Manny being Manny started to tarnish his legacy. In 2008, he got into numerous altercations, the first coming on June 5th, when he backhanded Kevin Youkilis in the dugout because he was upset that he kept throwing his equipment after recording outs. At this time, Youkilis was undeniably the leader of the clubhouse, so to start a physical fight rather than use his words wasn't the best avenue to pursue. Then, just a few weeks later on the 29th, he shoved a 64-year-old traveling secretary to the ground after he was unable to get 14 tickets for his friends and family. Up until this point, Manny being Manny was a term used to cover his lack of hustle on plays in the field or his quirky behaviors off it. Now he was starting to get into physical confrontations. Combine this with him saying the Sox didn't deserve a player like him was the final straw, as the Sox paid the Dodgers to take him off their hands at the trade deadline in 2008. Manny's time in Boston is hard to put into words because he brought the club to a level in which they hadn't reached since 1918, was one of the most dominant hitters in the game, and had some iconic moments in the field, such as his play against the Baltimore Orioles when he caught a fly ball by the wall, jumped it, high-fived a fan, and then doubled up the runner at first base. But at the same time, he was an extremely difficult player to coach, oftentimes faking injuries to take a rest, refusing to pinch hit on his days off even though the team was shorthanded, and in his final season started to get into fights with people in the organization. It was necessary to part ways, and gave Manny the opportunity to play for a new ball club, something he had requested several times over the years. Finally being freed from Boston also lit a spark within him as he went on a tear for the remainder of 2008, mashing 17 home runs with a .396 average and over 1200 OPS in just 53 games. He helped take a Dodgers team that was hovering around 500 for the majority of the season to a division victory. Then in the playoffs, he tried his absolute best over the next 2 seasons to win a title in LA. But unfortunately, he was never able to lead them past the championship round. Yet the most disappointing part about his time with the Dodgers came during the 2009 regular season, when he tested positive for a woman's fertility drug. This type of steroid is typically used as a natural way to restart the body's production of testosterone after coming off a cycle, meaning he had taken steroids before. Sure enough, later that year, his name was listed among the players who tested positive during the league's anonymous survey testing in 2003. But the evidence continued to be stacked against him when in 2011, now a member of the Tampa Bay Rays, he became the first player in MLB history to test positive 3 times and was subsequently suspended for 100 games. However, instead of serving the suspension, he decided to retire from Major League Baseball. Manny Ramirez was the most enigmatic player to ever grace the game. But what's incredible is that there was so much more I didn't even touch base on. He was a character on and off the field. He made his coaches' heads boil by showing a lack of hustle, but made up for it with his elite bat. In fact, he ranks 15th in MLB history in terms of home runs with 555. Still holds the record for most in playoff history with 29, and is undoubtedly one of the greatest playoff performers. He is still trying his best to make his case to be in the Hall of Fame, but with the likes of fellow steroid users Alex Rodriguez, Mark McGwire, and Barry Bonds not in the Hall, it seems like a far cry to assume he could one day check off his second lifelong dream. But tell me, do you think he deserves a spot in the Hall of Fame? Let me know in the comments, and make sure to subscribe if you enjoyed. It would help me out a lot. And if you would like to check out a video about a pitcher who is able to locate his pitches so well, it seemed as though he physically couldn't miss a single pitch, then click the video on your screen.